Welcome, my friends. Nice to be back. And tonight we're going to investigate the deeper significance behind the commandment not to engage with one of the most impure substances, one of the most unkosher entities. And if one individual would ask you, what is the most unkosher entity that a person can consume? Most would come to the deduction that it's maybe meat and milk mixed together, maybe a pig. But we're going to learn that, in fact, the most unkosher entity that a person is able to consume is known as a sheretz. A sheretz is an insect, as the Torah tells us in Vayikra, Yud Aleph Mem Gimel, Al teshakzu es nafshoi seichem b'chol hasheretz hashoiretz v'loisit behem v'nitamtem bam. Don't become abominable. Don't become disgusting, it says, from your soul level with the consumption of anything that teems or swarms against upon the earth. And through it, it says, v'loi titmeu bahem. Don't become impure. V'nitamtem bam. Interesting concept again, that it's reiterated, and you will become impure by it. So it's a very crazy concept that out of all of the entities that a person should not consume, we are told again that the most impure and the most problematic is an insect. And not only is it so problematic, we are told the level of its problem, where we see, and this is brought down in the Pnini Halacha. I'm going to read a little bit of an outline of how extensive this particular prohibition goes. It says like this: Mekach kafla toires isurei shrotzim pamim rabois l'shoinos shoinim lamdu chachavim. Because the Torah has reiterated many, many times that a person should not consume insects, and it specifies it in different terminologies, the rabbis learn from this. Okay, we're right at the beginning, page 1 here, that it says, and if you need some sources, there's some at the front, that to eat an insect that swims in the ocean or swims in water, a person gets 4 malchus, 4 lashes. Sheret haaretz, 5 malchus. Person who eats an insect, consumes an insect that swarms upon the earth, i.e., some type of ant, that's upon the ground. It says that they are struck 5 times. And a sheret ha'oif, a flying insect, it says they receive 6 malchus, 6 lashes. Now, what on earth is going on here? Why is it that there is a differentiation between these insects? I mean, why are we preferring some insects over others? Why do we say that the flying insects get much more of a penalty than the ones in the water? An insect's an insect. So why is the Torah telling us that there are such differentiations? Listen to this. The consumption of an insect is more problematic than any other form of consumption of food. Most unkosher entity is an insect. If a person has crab, let's say, for example, God forbid, or they consume a pig, God forbid, or or they decide, they're going to eat some type of unkosher bird, like a crow. It says that they only get 1 sidra, 1 order of 39 lashes. But a person who consumes a insect, we see that this space of lashing, this space of punishment is multiplied so many, many times. B'nois of lekach, der klal rak oichel kashir kazayis. Now, generally speaking, a person is able to, God forbid, fall into the prohibition of consuming a prohibited entity if they eat a specific size of that entity. Does anyone know what the size of a particular product one needs to consume in order to fall into the prohibition? So it's referred to as a kazayas, which is literally translated as an olive amount, but we know it is colloquially known as the size of a matchbox. Okay, that is the size that a person needs to consume of that entity to fall into the prohibition from the Torah. Ulam, but nevertheless, when it comes to an insect, one small insect is already enough to disqualify an individual, to put them into the category of consuming a sheret, God forbid. Yesh chumra miyuchedes shoyel meduba bebria shalema kol ha'ochel afil sheretz katan. So, provided that one consumes even a little insect that's found upon lettuce, little microscopic, well, it's a big discussion how microscopic, but as long as it's a visible entity, one has fallen into this particular prohibition from the Torah. The Torah has already been transgressed through the simple consumption of this entity. Okay. Now, that's the basic overview of the source of this prohibition. What we're going to see is that despite this prohibition having such severe consequences and such unique parameters in which one is able to consume something that is so small, but yet fall into this prohibition, we're going to see that there are some very strange variations to this law that does not apply to any other law. And then we're going to expound from this law. We're going to learn some insanely pertinent frameworks about self that are going to come about. So let's have a look. Have a look at this teaching from Yoredeya, which is the halachic discussion around the laws of insects. It says down the bottom, Toilaim hagdelim eperes, betalush mutarim. Unbelievable. Shloi asra Torah el sheret asheret al aretz. Now, insects that you find in fruit. You know the classic joke, what's worse than finding a worm in your apple? Finding half a worm. But we see here that it's quite unique that if one was to look at the halachic parameters of consuming insects, if one finds insects within a fruit, it seems that it is permitted to be consumed. So one second. We have just gone through this whole process of defining how problematic it is to consume insects. We have identified that insects are amongst the worst entities that one could consume. That's why if a person says, no, I eat semi-kosher, I go to the restaurant and instead of ordering, whatever it is, I order salad. Okay, order salad, that's very good. But how do you know that it's been checked properly? It could be that that salad is even more problematic than the meat that's being served cooked in butter. Just something to consider here. So the extent of this particular halacha is very, very, very important. And we're going to see that what is also is that if this entity is found within a fruit, we've just learned that it's okay. Listen to what happens. What is this talking about? It is allowed to be consumed if it has not yet left the fruit. Okay, so how do you leave a fruit? Well, it's embedded into the fruit as a larvae or some type of egg, and then it is birthed within the fruit. Now, once it leaves the fruit, it is prohibited. But if it stays within the fruit, it is permitted to be consumed. Unbelievable. Can you imagine such a concept? As it says about Perishim and Apri, Afilo Egia La'aretz Ela Shemeis ba'aver koydem shegia la'aretz afilu lo perish kuloi mehapri ele muktsosoi or shloi perish ele al gebe apri al gerayin shemeseichoi or sheperish mepri lepri asur. If this entity had detached itself from the fruit that left, even a portion of it had left, even if it had left and come back in, or went from one fruit to a neighboring fruit, decided to move houses, it is prohibited, it says. So according to the Shulchan Aruch, if you find a sheret, you find a worm or some type of insect inside of a fruit, even if you see a hole on the outside, we do not assume that it's left the fruit. Unbelievable. So you could technically, according to the Shulchan Aruch, pick up a date and find an insect within that date and consume it. Great protein, nice taste of the juices that have been absorbed by the fruit into the worm. This is what it's saying. According to the Ramah, according to the Ashkenazim, if you have a hole outside of the fruit, there are those that prohibit it. And the halacha is for Ashkenazim, if there is a hole on the outside of the fruit, we don't allow it. Why? It may have left and come back in. All right? Unbelievable laws. What on earth is going on here? What is going on? Not only that, we're going to see another unique law in the next halacha brought down in Yerodam. If you have flour that has been infested with insects, it says that you are allowed to grind the flour into grind the wheat into flour. That's provided that you checked the grains to see that there were no visible insects. Once you've checked that the grains have no visible insects, you can go ahead, grind it down into a flour. The kol toila sheyiresham, after, if you've ground it, you still find some insects, you must chuck away those insects. And whatever's remaining is allowed. Meaning like this, once the insect is pulverized into a non-entity, what we refer to as a beria is an entity, a full insect. Once it's broken or halved and it's no longer an entity and has been totally absorbed into the food item, that it's no longer visible, it loses its prohibition. Okay, another unique concept. We don't say this by pig, by pork. You cut the pork in half and then you mix it into your food, now it's okay. We don't say that. Why by an insect do we say this? Yeah?
You said in the first part.
Now what? That it's so problematic. Right. It seems that it is only problematic where it is still an entity and it is visible. So I wouldn't be able to take an ant and bite it in half. But what I would be able to do is if I didn't know that there were any ants in this, I checked and I did my best. And then I pulverized it, that it all became juiced up or zhuzhed up. Even though maybe I did my best to check it, but maybe there were, maybe there was something there. If I would say maybe there was some pork in this, I would not eat this unless I verified diligently that there was nothing left. When it comes to insects, once it's pulverized, it seems to be okay. Batul b'shishim, it's nullified. We don't say nullification by any other entity that is prohibited at its core. So again, pig. You have pork, we do not say that it's nullified. If it loses its flavor, there's another discussion. But when it comes to insects, we have this unique concept that if it's no longer an entity, it loses its status. So on one extreme, we see that this is one of the worst entities that is possible to engage with. But on the other extreme, we're seeing that even the one microscopic insect that is visible to the eye, you can't even make out that it's an insect unless you have a magnifying glass. You can see there's something there. That's already prohibited. But on the other hand, if it hasn't left the fruit that it's in, there's crazy scenarios that animals, we had this unique case in Israel where fish was found to have worms inside of it. It's a very big question. Can one engage with such an entity? If the worms have come into the fish when they were only microscopic larvae, and they came in and they grew inside the fish, it never left, it's permitted to be consumed, even if the worm is, there. Unbelievable concept. So now, what we're going to see here is the deeper reason behind it. Okay? So have a look at what the Rabbeinu Bechaya says in the verse that we read from the Torah. As it says, Loitit mo bahem, do not become impure, v'nitamtem ba, and you will become impure through its consumption. Listen to what the Rabbeinu Bechaya says. Yoimar v'loi titmo bahem b'chilasan b'guf. Shim ta'asu kein v'nitamtem bam b'nefesh. Do not consume it. So one of the ways of reading this repetition in the Torah of impurity, it says, do not become impure and do not become impure. Why does it have to repeat it? So he explains that on one practical level, do not consume it and become impure by eating it with your body, that you will then become impure by eating it through your soul. Your soul will become impure. Listen to what he says on a deeper level. V'hamila chaseira aleph, shulasham timtum. The word v'nitamtem is lacking an aleph. The word nitamtem or tuma, which is generally spelt with an aleph, means impurity. Here it is lacking an aleph. And the word v'nitamtem without an aleph, you know what it means? It means constricted. It means dull. It means contaminated. And more than contaminated, it means blocked. What it's saying here is unbelievable concept. If a person, God forbid, consumes one of these entities, and this goes for all unkosher food, what transpires is that they experience something called timtum halev. Timtum halev means a blockage of the heart. A spiritual contamination which creates a blockage of their heart that no spiritual energy is able to be absorbed into that individual. It's a spiritual cholesterol that is caused that prevents the flow of spiritual energy into that person. And that's why the terminology of v'nitamtem bam is used without an aleph, because the word timtum means blocked off, blocked. So now, let's get into the deeper understanding here of what is transpiring. And we're going to look at the teachings of the Likutei Halachos. Listen to what he teaches. V'zeh b'chinas toilayim, she'ikei surim kashem roichshim v'shortzim ba'af ha'aretz. Says that the main prohibition of consuming insects comes from the concept of them swarming upon the earth. Kisham ikach yizasam, because their energy is the energy of the earth. What does that mean, that it's the energy of dirt? Kisham makoim hapagam yoyse, there in the dirt is the greatest affliction. We're going to see why. Because he writes that the earth or the dirt of this world is one of the lowest energy forces that a person can engage with. They have to see and understand what he's referring to, because we understand that nice, nutritious soil is one of the most beautiful things. To sink your fingers into, some beautiful soil Gewaldig, unbelievable. To touch the earth, to be grounded is beautiful. It's not referring to the earth. He's referring to the energy of earth. What the energy of earth is a reference to here is the Bechinas V'nachash Afar Lachmei, that we are told that which entity was cursed to eat from the earth? The snake. So what the earth represents on a spiritual level is depression. What the earth represents on a spiritual level is not being mobile. It's being stationary. What the earth represents on a spiritual level is that something is lacking intrinsic vitality. It seems, that you have the dasi, that is comes from the ancestry of the elephant. Such things, Reb Shlomo. Here we see that part of the same spiritual family are insects together with the snake family. In terms of spiritual energy, they are associated and are one. You don't have insects that walk around in a way that they are elevated, even like animals. They crawl upon the earth on their tummy, very similar to the snake. So what we've associated now, before we go into a deeper understanding of what these entities are able to relate to us about ourselves, is that they represent problematic energy. And we see that, as he says here in the next piece, you see that these insects, they go into all different places. They go into all different foods, umashke and drinks, Now, not only that, they create a disgusting energy in anything they enter into. They tend to anything of a holy energy they want to destroy. If you don't guard your food, the insect will tend to it. The flies will come and they'll lay their larvae and then they'll turn into maggots. We see what happens. It's a very, very, very much fertile space for the insect to enter into, something that has a fruition or has a capability. It's drawn to it. And not only is it drawn to it, he writes that it is drawn to those things that are also decaying. As we see the same thing happens with the energy of the snake. What happens is, if we don't guard ourselves, we are learning that there is something called insects. And these insects don't only represent the flies and the worms and the different entities that exist in this world, but on a spiritual level, we have the energy of insects within our own lives. And he says, and you know what it is particularly associated with? Two of the most dangerous words: atzvus, depression, and atzlus, laziness. So what these insects want to inflict upon a person who has a ripe spiritual energy is they want to be absorbed into that entity, and they want to create depression, and they want to create laziness. Shekol zeh b'chinas shkotzim and amosim shem zumas nachash b'chinas nachash afa lachmei. B'chinas atzvus v'atzvus b'chinas afa. It is all associated with the energy of earth, the dirt. Kanira. B'chusha kotzim shkotzim and amosim metachlis atzvus v'atzvus v'chaya shalem muat b'yosim v'kol geder achai. They are lacking the vitality and the ability. But listen to what he says here. And in fact, we'll pause here just to insert a few more ideas before we conclude with this final paragraph. He writes in other places that the energy of a sheretz, which is referred to as this insect, if one is to take the terminology sheretz and split it up, you know what it spells? She-ratz. What's it mean, ratz? To run. A sheretz is this energy of running, this energy of instability of self. It's this energy of constant inability to feel a sense of serenity, connectivity. It is chaos. This is what these energies are. And that chaos, represented by this negative energy, is something that causes a person to become unstable. And that instability turns into depression and into laziness. What we see, the effect of engaging with this energy, is something called vinitamtem, that there is a blockage of the heart, that a person loses the vitality of the soul. Now, if you recall, what did we say was unique about this particular energy? If it is so problematic, why is one then allowed to consume it if it's within the fruit? Nice, good. So one potential answer is that it has not yet crawled on the ground. But let's say it was on a fruit and it left the fruit, walked around on the tree, and then came back into the fruit. Would that be allowed? No, not allowed. So what's so problematic about it, particularly leaving this fruit? And then, if we say it's such a problematic energy, why am I allowed then to sever this insect, cut it up, zhuzh it, not intentionally, but post facto, if that transpired, I would be then allowed to consume that entity. Why? What has changed? So listen to what he says here. He says if a person is just a little bit cautious, and this is what this energy, or this is what this particular law of being cautious around insects teaches us. In order to remove an insect from a food product, what do you need to do? You need to pay attention. You need to take this entity, you need to wash it, you need to observe it, you need to look at it, and now it's clean. He says if we engage with ourselves in that way, if we are a little bit more cautious, a little bit more mindful, a little bit more engaged with what we're engaging with, he says that with a little bit of zrizus and a little bit of looking, you're able to remove this insect. You're able to just take a bit of water, a bit of soap or salt or whatever you want to use and just get it off. It's very easy to kill them. And the reason why it's very easy to kill them, he says, on a spiritual level, is because they don't have vitality of their own. A louse that is found on Shabbos, according to halacha, is not even considered living. It's able to be killed, while other insects are not. But what we see here is that what transpires in ourselves is that when we start to lose vitality, when we start to have a blockage of our soul, when we start to lose that energy force, that's when the insects start to seep in. That's when they start to crawl in. When we're looking for vitality, when we're looking for life, This is where this energy force starts to create problems for us. It seems to a person that it's almost impossible to remove the consumption of insects. Impossible. Just a little bit of consciousness, a little bit of alacrity. You can kill thousands upon thousands of these entities with much ease. But this is the answer as to what we see here. Now, I just want to clarify something. When it comes to the energy of God's creations, we are very sensitive to the extent that there are stories told even about King David that wouldn't harm a spider because he was aware that this is an entity created by God and he would not even engage with the killing of any entity. The Rambam says even if you have to kill a mosquito, one should avoid killing it with their bare hands because to engage with killing anything of God's creations is of a very, very significant nature. So this is not saying that you can't be awed. I went to the bush this past Shabbos and the most insane creatures and insects were observed. It was just unbelievable to see Hashem's creations. So understand that we're not saying here, there happen to be locusts and locusts are, or grasshoppers, many of them are kosher. But nevertheless, many other insects are there and you can see Hashem's wonders. But what we are seeing in terms of its consumption and its energy and what that energy represents is very dangerous. And to give us a greater insight and conclude here, listen to what he says in terms of regarding this law of it leaving. He says one of the most important spaces to guard a person's engagement with this world is the beginning infestation. What he writes here, betchilas richusham, when they are growing from their larvae. When they are in the fruit and they're starting to become entities. Before they leave the fruit, they are allowed, which means like this. Listen to what he says. Once they leave the fruit, then they are prohibited. Everything starts off with your mind. And what these shrotzim, what these entities and insects represent on a deeper level is our thoughts. The mind that is unable to be still and is constantly running around. And the most dangerous effect of these insects is when they are infesting that entity and they are causing one's mind and thoughts to become ratzim, running. Without the mind, without the thoughts, nothing can be done. So the beginning of all negativity starts with the mind. It starts with guarding one's mind, and it starts with having a healthy thinking process and healthy engagement with thought. And as soon as these insects infiltrate, at that point in time, they are still kosher. Meaning, when a person's mind is fertile with positive energy and they're thinking about something positive, what starts to happen is the mind becomes infiltrated, God forbid, with these negative thoughts. And he said, you have to guard your fruit. What's the fruit? The fruit is consciousness. The fruit is the intellect. Lishmor peirei haseichel. Guard the fruits of your mind. Me'oid shlo yiskalkel, that it shouldn't become embedded with these entities, chas v'shalom. You need to put some type of insect repellent on the mind. So ideally, you don't want any insect infiltrating the mind. But this is the point in terms of this particular law of it leaving the mind. That is, even if a person's mind has become embedded, God forbid, with an insect, with a negative thought, with a negative energy, provided that it doesn't leave the mind, which means provided that it doesn't flow into action or behavior, and it's still an entity that's within the mind, in the thinking, he says it's a normal reality. People, human beings, have issues with thoughts, have issues with their mindset. Sometimes they're feeling lazy, sometimes they're feeling depressed. That's a normal reality. Do you let it fester? Do you let it grow into something that then is expressed through action? Is the danger. And this is what he's saying here. He goes into this. Now, what we have answered here, and what this has been for us, I'll just conclude with this unbelievable terminology. Don't allow your mind to fester. Don't allow your mind to fester. So what this has been is an unbelievable analysis. This is a very, very powerful learning in which we've started off with a halachic exploration into a seemingly very detached halachic experience where we've learned about insects and we've learned about a few contradictions or paradoxes that appear when it comes to this particular law of insects. And we've asked, why is it so problematic? Why is it such a focused on prohibition? And at the same time, we saw that if it's still embedded in the fruit and has never left, it's allowed. And what Rabbi Nachman has explained for us, and Rabbi Nassan in his teachings in the Likutei Halachos, is that what the insect represents is negative thinking, is all of the parts of ourselves that are shrotzim. And you see that these entities, these insects, they tend to things that are starting to become decrepit. What the insect tends to and causes the individual to go to are all problematic things, all things that are becoming disgusting or that are disgusting, that are decaying, that have no vitality of their own. That's what the insect is drawn to. And same to the negative thoughts inside of the self drives a person. When they have a timtum alev, they have a blockage of the heart, a blockage of the soul. When they don't have ruach hakodesh, or they don't have the ruach that is shruyaba, when they don't have that spiritual energy, these insects draw a person to that space of defilement, God forbid. And what we are learning is how vital it is to guard the fruit of the mind, and at the same time recognize that if there is an infestation of the mind, you can heal it. As long as the thought hasn't left the mind, you are able to heal that thinking. You are able to take that energy and redirect it. You are able to take that energy and allow it to subside. It's a normal reality that the mind comes up. And it's a normal reality. Sometimes you're not feeling great. The question is how you guard yourself in that space. And what's fascinating, and for many, many, many years, I never understood why there had to be a distinction. Why is it that there is such a distinction between the type of insects that a person engages with? Who cares if it is flying? Who cares if it is crawling on the ground? And who cares if it is something that swims in the ocean or in the water? Why is that a fundamental concept? You have an idea here? Yeah? Anyone have a suggestion? Okay. Well, it's still very problematic. So we know that there is a potential for infestation of ego within three particular parts of self. One is the body, pleasure, laziness. The energy of the body is something that is very, very beautiful and very much potentially filled with vitality and connectivity and joy and spirituality. At the same time, the body can be a source of very, very, very problematic energy. It can be a source of pain. It can be a source of laziness, of heaviness, of being drawn to a particular experience which is problematic for their soul. The body can be a very, very, very beautiful energy force and a very destructive force. The next energy that we are told is the energy of the emotions. The emotions can be filled with vitality, filled with direction to the spiritual, filled with connectivity and joy and exuberance and many, many unbelievable emotions. But it can be filled with a lot of destruction. And every every emotional energy that's found within the 7 emotional energies can be used for positive, can be used for negative. And the final one is the mind, is the space of thinking. Now, what's amazing is that these particular insects, the flying insect, the crawling insect, and the insect that swims, I think, represents these particular 3 energies of self, where the most dangerous is the mind. If a person's mind is afflicted and affected, that will then filter through into everything else. And that's why it's centered around 6 prohibitions of consuming 1 insect that flies. And the energy force of the emotions we know is 5 prohibitions. And the swimming energy, which is hidden under the ground, you can't see it, is the body. What's inside of them is that space of the 4 particular prohibitions. And what it's saying to us is this hierarchy of self, that we have to guard ourselves. We have to guard our bodies. We have to guard and look after our emotions. We have to guard and look after our minds. But what comes out of all of this is the inextricable link and the deep wisdom that is found within all halachic experiences. A person thinks that they're learning halakha. And halakha is gavaldik. It's very, very interesting. There's a lot of unbelievable analysis that a person is able to experience through halachic learning. But to then understand that halacha is linked to some of the most deepest concepts within Kabbalistic wisdom, that halacha is linked to some of the most vital components of self, is an unbelievable revelation. And so unbelievable that if an individual doesn't have, in my opinion, Kabbalistic awareness of what is actually transpiring in the halacha, you can't really understand the halacha at its core. Can't really come on 6, 5, and 4, like big deal. Can't really come on. Now it's left the fruit and it's come back in. Now it's a problem. We can answer one final concept, and that is if the entity itself has been destroyed, has been halved, has been engaged with or zhuzhed up, that it's no longer a barrier, that it's no longer an entity. That was our last halachic concept. Then it becomes able to be dissolved in the rest, which is saying to us like this: if you take that insect, you take that mindset, you take that concept of thought and you destroy it, you're able to halve it, you're able to see through it, then it can become absorbed back into the rest. It doesn't have the same energy force. And this is some deep teachings and some deeper significance behind the prohibition of consuming insects. Thank you, my friends. I hope you enjoyed. And if you have any questions, please feel free to engage. Yeah. What we see is that this energy is tendent to those places of, firstly, vitality in the self. It tends to the mind. It tends to come to destroy that which is whole, that which has a little opening of negativity. Maybe there's a little wound or there's something that's opening up, but it's still filled with vitality. This entity is going to be absorbed into that. It tends to that. And then it wants to destroy and infect the whole thing. And that's the danger. The danger is it looks so insignificant. it looks like it has no effect. It looks like you also can't get rid of it. You can't guard yourself from it. That's why it's so dangerous. Person thinks about their thoughts and they say, okay, big deal. It's just a thought. No. You have to be very careful how those thoughts are engaged with, how you guard the fruit of your consciousness, how you guard the fruits of your thoughts. To be very careful. And if those energy forces are in the mind, you have to see how to heal it. And that energy force can become embedded in the emotions as well, and it can become embedded in the body. And we see that hierarchy transpiring, and that's why it's so much more dangerous. Because of its seeming insignificance and its ability to infiltrate. You can't notice all of them. Sometimes they're sitting very, very discreetly upon something. You can't see it. It needs focus. It needs sensitivity. It needs mindfulness. And it needs to have a bit of engagement in order to rectify that space. Understand?
So do you think like a flying animal that's prohibited, like a crow, and a sea creature that's prohibited, and the land creature that's prohibited, the same as the insect?
Those are no. When it comes to other impure entities, they're all considered on the same level. When it comes to insects, this is one of the unique circumstances where there is a hierarchy of negativity, where the Torah is telling us that the negative energy that is associated with these particular entities is so problematic, and it gives us a hierarchy of its effect. First the mind, then the emotions, and then the body. Yeah.
So
it is worse spiritual, 100%. All right, my friends, thank you. Should be with Brocha. Please, God Hashem should guard us from all of these energy forces. We should at least understand that everything that's found in the Torah is deeply intertwined with the psychology of the soul, and understand that that's the space of our engagement with everything that's transpiring. It's there to teach us about ourselves. It's there to teach us about the deeper wisdom of how to be happier, more connected, more in tune individuals. Please, God should be with a lot of bracha. Shkoyach.